Tonight, the reputational crisis hanging over the government takes down another MP. Backbencher Andrew Laming quits politics.
Andrew Laming should go. He brings disrepute and disgrace to our national parliament.
Also tonight, lockdown avoided in Brisbane, but confusion over the corona-positive man. Authorities now say he didn't hold a party. Children among the dead in a brutal crackdown on pro-democracy protesters in Myanmar. And will the Red Centre be able to keep the lights on now JobKeeper has come to an end? Good evening, Dijana Damjanovic with ABC News. One of Federal Parliament's longest-serving MPs has announced he'll quit at the next election as the scrutiny of Australia's poor political culture continues. Government backbencher Andrew Laming has confirmed he'll first take paid medical leave to begin formal training on improving his behaviour. From Canberra, Andrew Green reports.
Queensland Liberal MP Andrew Laming has faced days of damaging accusations. The latest allegation of inappropriate behaviour emerged last night.
The photo was really inappropriate, especially when I was bent over.
Now the member for Bowman is bowing out.
Andrew has reflected on that conversation with the Prime Minister. And following that conversation with the Prime Minister, he has decided not to recontest the next election.
Before then, Andrew Laming's announced he'll take medical leave and confirmed from tomorrow he'll begin empathy and communication training. Not just to be a better MP, but to be a deeper and more empathic person than what the recent events have demonstrated. The trained doctor will also receive clinical counselling, saying, "I intend to get that help immediately and at my own expense."
Andrew Laming isn't fit to be a member of Parliament today. Andrew Laming should go. He brings disrepute and disgrace to our national parliament.
With the Morrison government clinging to the slimmest of parliamentary majorities, losing Andrew Laming before the next election isn't an option. This week, the Prime Minister will announce changes to the frontbench team he'll take to that contest, a cabinet that will include Attorney General Christian Porter and Defence Minister Linda Reynolds, who are both also on medical leave. And before Parliament returns in 6 weeks, some members of the government are proposing radical steps to improve the culture inside the building, including drug and alcohol testing of politicians.
I think we need to have the highest possible standards in our workplace.
As well as training for MPs on dealing with staff.
We need to make sure we provide a supportive workforce that is in a professional environment.
And an end to late-night sittings. Andrew Green, ABC News, Canberra.
From the outbreak on the Ruby Princess cruise ship to Australia's international border closures, the cruise ship industry took a major dive when coronavirus hit. Now, one Darwin ship management company says JobKeeper is the only thing that has kept it afloat, and now it's preparing to sink. Emma Masters reports.
Darwin-born Chris Cleanthus has been managing the arrival of international and local ships for decades. But when COVID hit, the ships stopped cruising, and so did his business.
It's affected us in a big way, from 35 plus, sometimes close to 60 staff, maybe 100. We're down to 12. And now they've taken JobKeeper away.
In recent years, cruise and expedition ships became a booming business in the top end, delivering up to $60 million annually to the economy. Today, it's a different story. And with the last lifebuoy of JobKeeper ending, many in this industry say they're going under.
We're going to fold. We're going to lose our houses. And there's a lot of people who rely on this.
For many Territory businesses, JobKeeper has been vital. 4,605 received it in the first phase of the rollout. In January this year, 1,283 were still relying on the payments. The Territory Government's pleas for extra Commonwealth help has so far fallen on deaf ears.
We've had those lines of communication, particularly around some of those sectors that have been hard hit, and so we'll continue to work with them.
But in another major blow, the Territory Government has introduced a raft of new restrictions for domestic boutique cruises. Among them, a cap on passengers and the number of boats in Territory waters.
We need the expedition ships as well, and the tourists need them, our locals need them, our industry needs it.
So I can absolutely understand the frustration, particularly of those businesses, but these decisions haven't been made lightly and they've been based on clinical evidence.
A bleak path for businesses facing a terminal end. Emma Masters, ABC News.
The fire hose of money that supported Australians through the pandemic is about to run dry. With JobKeeper payments ending tomorrow, there are predictions unemployment will rise. And the biggest worries are held for workers in a handful of industries. Casey Briggs takes a look at the state of Australia's workforce.
Australian Grand Prix has been cancelled.
Rewind back to this time last year, before the pandemic, when there were around 13 million Australians with a job and a bit under 8 million without one. Then the virus forced many businesses to slow down or shut. In 1 month, more than 600,000 people lost their job. And that would have been higher if the federal government hadn't brought in the wage subsidy JobKeeper, which immediately began supporting more than a quarter of the workforce to stay where they are. Fast forward through the year and these numbers started to recover. That number has now bounced back to about where it was a year ago, but there are still a lot of people having their wages subsidised. So with the scheme ending, where do they go?
In my view, it's inevitable that unemployment will rise. The question is, how quickly do we come through the other side?
There's no suggestion the economy will be sent back into recession, but many analysts put the likely number of job losses over 100,000, and the government agrees.
We are continuing to closely monitor the situation in different sectors and do expect that the end of the JobKeeper program will lead to some businesses closing and jobs being lost.
Although the economy may be relatively sound on the whole, not all sectors are affected equally. In December, JobKeeper was helping pay the wages of nearly 350,000 workers in accommodation, arts and recreation services and transport. Because of ongoing coronavirus restrictions, those sectors are yet to fully bounce back.
We had JobKeeper as the bridge to the other side, but for those industries, the bridge is still there and we haven't got to the other side.
The big question is, when we do get to the other side, how many of those businesses will still exist? Casey Briggs, ABC News.
There's much relief tonight, with southeast Queensland avoiding a third coronavirus lockdown. The latest community cluster has grown by 1 case, but authorities now say information they released about a man holding a party before he got his positive result was wrong. The confusion comes as COVID-wary travellers across Australia prepare for the Easter break.
As Queenslanders stepped out for testing, authorities stepped up to correct the record. Yesterday, Queensland Health said a COVID-positive Brisbane man hosted a gathering of around 25 people at his home, between being instructed to isolate and getting his positive test results. But the information was wrong.
The contact tracing and inquiries that we've conducted after that reveals that in fact there were only 5 other persons there.
The allegation raised the ire of some. The government says it's extremely unfortunate.
Now, whether the health officials misunderstood what he said, I wasn't there, I didn't hear the conversation.
The ABC has been in touch with the man wrongly said to have held the gathering. He's now in hospital and says the situation has caused him a great deal of stress. The latest cluster has closed businesses visited by 2 men who tested positive to the highly infectious UK variant.
A deep clean will go through and 56 of our staff members have had to go into quarantine and get tested.
Anna Clark should have been reflecting on her mother's life with loved ones.
Very upsetting to be here and not be able to actually go inside and celebrate a wonderful life.
Today, a 3rd case was added to the cluster. He's the brother of one of the positive men, fully recovered and no longer infectious.
It's most likely that he's had it recently and is one of those missing links.
The silver lining is no lockdown. at least for now.
We're very comfortable with the situation.
We've been dealing with this virus now for a long time, and we've been dealing with these variants. So I think we've got a little bit more time.
Interstate travellers have been urged to check border rules. WA is making Queensland arrivals quarantine.
It's 14 days in isolation, so...
The outbreak so close to Easter is worrying for tourism businesses, also dealing with the end of JobKeeper.
I feel the next 3 months are going to be the hardest.
The ripple effects extended to football, with the Brisbane Lions stuck in Melbourne. It's strongly recommended adults don masks inside public spaces.
Far too early to relax.
The business of testing and contact tracing continues as the nation waits. Emma Pollard, ABC News, Brisbane.
The Northern Territory Government is advising hundreds of people who've arrived in the top end from Brisbane in the last week to self-isolate and test for COVID-19. All arrivals from Brisbane City and Moreton Bay after the 20th of March must now quarantine until they receive a negative test result. Health authorities are also advising any arrivals from the two regions after the 12th of March to quarantine and get tested if they show symptoms of the virus. The Health Minister says she's concerned some Territorians trying to book or receive test results aren't answering callbacks from the local COVID hotline.
Yes, okay. That callback will come from a private blocked number. So please answer that if you are expecting a callback. It's creating some more inefficiencies for our teams by people not answering those calls.
Further directions will be issued if cases in Brisbane continue to increase in the coming days. We know that rates of domestic violence increased during the COVID-19 lockdown, and experts say survivors were also less likely to have sought treatment as well. That's especially worrying for people who suffered concussions from assault or strangulation, because they could have an undiagnosed brain injury. One woman who survived brutal assaults has told her story to the ABC in the hope it will encourage others to get help. And a warning, this story from Kelly Hughes contains graphic descriptions of violence.
Cherie Riemann was lucky to escape with her life after enduring almost a decade of horrendous domestic violence.
I was probably inches of my life of consciousness, him not even knowing himself what he was doing.
During one particularly vicious assault, she was punched at least 30 times in the head. Beaten and lying on the floor of the shower, she called an ambulance, unaware she was suffering a brain bleed.
I didn't want to tell the doctor, but she pretty much said that if I don't tell her the truth, next time it's going to be a body bag. So that pretty much woke me up to it all.
In the months that followed, she struggled with her speech, concentration and memory. A year on, she's still suffering.
The migraines, I literally had one the other night to the point I felt like my brain was swelling. That's the pain, the pressure and the pain I get.
Experts say it's common for survivors who suffer head and neck injuries, including strangulation, to be unaware of the long-lasting impacts of the abuse. A Brain Injury Australia study found 40% of domestic and family violence victims who went to hospital over a decade in Victoria had a brain injury. And that's just the ones who got help.
There's really good evidence from overseas that women who sustain a brain injury from domestic and family violence often don't go anywhere near a healthcare setting like a hospital or a GP's office.
Domestic violence advocates want to encourage survivors of violent assaults to seek medical attention, even if their injuries are from some time ago. They also want more training for medical professionals.
And the better we get at understanding brain injury and the relationship between sexual violence and domestic violence, the less risk we'll have of that not being assessed.
It's not okay, and I don't want anyone else to go through this. It's not just for the women, but for the kids, because the kids suffer just as much.
Cherie Riemann hopes telling her harrowing story will inspire others to get help. Kelly Hughes, ABC News.
And if you or someone you know needs help, please contact 1800-RESPECT by phone or their website. Still to come on ABC News Sunday, will half-price flights be enough to bring back tourism jobs lost in the NT to COVID-19? Coming up, what operators on the ground say needs to happen to kick-start the pandemic recovery.
That one element of stimulus is not the complete answer. Until we get some really strong news from the federal government about when borders may open, it just won't start to kick back.
That special report a little later in the program. A new report has identified 4 neo-Nazi groups operating in Australia that have been banned in Europe and the United States. It warns that Australia has become fertile ground for extremist activism and violence, and there are growing calls for authorities here to do more. Europe correspondent Linton Besser reports.
Australian far-right extremists calling for a white revolution and mocking federal MPs as race traitor vermin.
Greetings from Germany.
They belong to a surging neo-Nazi scene worldwide.
We are seeing more and more right-wing terrorism workload, and I think that risk is seen in a number of countries around the world, including Australia.
Superintendent Martin Snowden's team in Leeds had one of these groups, Sonnenkrieg Division, or SKD, banned in the UK. It's now proscribed in Australia too.
We do see SKD and other groups looking to draw in members from around the world, Australia, different parts of Europe.
These groups aren't like the skinheads of old. They operate online using encrypted platforms where they go looking for disaffected young men to recruit.
They're finding kind of new and innovative ways in order to recruit and pick up on grievances related to government lockdowns.
And that has raised concerns about what might happen upon lockdown release.
Now, a new UK report has identified more than a dozen other far-right groups operating down under, including 4 banned overseas, but not in Australia. Blood and Honour, the Proud Boys, Generation Identity and Combat 18. 10 years ago, 2 members of Combat 18 fired weapons at this Perth mosque. And 2 years ago, a man with links to Combat 18 assassinated a German politician, Walter Lübcke.
Governments should do all it can to ban and block these groups in order to prevent individuals from acting and avoiding more deaths like Walter Lübcke's.
They certainly engage in and believe in the use of violence.
A parliamentary inquiry is now examining whether Australia can more easily proscribe extremist groups.
You have a number of groups that have faced proscription in other countries that have not done so in Australia.
I think in the UK we've certainly seen the benefits of prescription.
A clear and urgent warning to Australia that more needs to be done. Linton Besser, ABC News, Leeds.
Defence chiefs from a dozen countries, including Australia, have condemned the bloody crackdown in Myanmar after the deadliest day since the military coup. Troops and police shot and killed at least 114 protesters, including young children. The United Nations says the military junta has carried out mass murder. And a warning, this report from Southeast Asia correspondent Zoe Ford contains distressing video.
Gunfire rings out as protesters scatter. In the bloodiest day since the military junta seized power, more than 100 people were killed in 24 hours. Security forces are firing indiscriminately and no one is safe. This father cradles his 13-year-old son who was shot and killed. A rubber bullet hit this 1-year-old baby in the eye. These people on a motorbike were driving away when the military shot them. And this man was brutally beaten as terrified neighbours watched on from their windows.
Myanmar's ousted government is pleading with the international community to do whatever it can to stop the junta's massacre.
They are guilty of war crime, crime against humanity, ethnic cleansing. So international community has to act now. That means that there has to be coordinated, targeted sanctions.
The leader of one of Myanmar's ethnic armed factions is calling for a global arms embargo.
They're using the weapons they bought from various countries to murder our people. Is it right to sell weapons to these people?
Sanctions from America and the EU have done nothing to dissuade the military so far. The junta's contempt for outside interference will be difficult to overcome.
They've got the firepower, they've got the numbers, they can keep on killing. The question is, does the resolve of the people stand up in the face of this onslaught? My sense is the people of Myanmar have had enough and are prepared to make unprecedented sacrifices.
It is very much a one-sided battle. In the face of gunfire, protesters are trying to protect themselves with shields, sticks and slingshots. They cower behind makeshift barriers, but the shooting is relentless. And yet they come onto the streets day after day, determined to fight for the democracy they voted for. Mazoe Ford, ABC News.
Now to tonight's special report and the challenge of pulling Australia out of a once-in-a-century crisis. Despite a stumbling start to our vaccine rollout, Australia is better placed than most. For industries like our tourism operators, it can't come soon enough. More than 500,000 full-time jobs in the sector were lost in 2020. That's 3 times more severe than the rest of the economy. With the end of JobKeeper today and international borders closed until at least October, unions fear another 300,000 are at risk. The federal government hopes cut-price flights to holiday destinations like the Red Centre will be enough to keep an industry on its knees alive. But operators on the ground say domestic tourism alone won't be enough. From Uluru, Oliver Gordon reports.
Morning dawns on a sacred monolith. But today, there are very few people here to see it. International border closures have seen visitation numbers to Uluru plummet, and you can see it in places like this, the sunrise viewing area. High-volume car parks sit nearly empty, and there's not much competition to get the best spot on this platform. Have you noticed that there's not been many people around?
Yes, we have lots of space to play around.
Not much of a sunrise today, but even otherwise, it's literally empty. It feels terrible. It doesn't feel like the most important tourist spot in Australia.
Less than a month before the world's first documented case of coronavirus, October 2019 was Uluru's busiest month on record. But international borders shuttering and state restrictions quickly flattened the tourism surge. For park manager Diane Scopel, it's been a roller coaster year.
For the last 12 months, we went from having our best year on record, which was over 400,000 visitors each year for the year, down to just over 100,000. So, it's been a significant impact on us here at Uluru.
The downturn sent shockwaves through Yulara, the tourist town on the border of Uluru.
Seeing it go from quite a vibrant place, lots and lots of residents and staff, to being very quiet, it's been, a bit disheartening for everyone, but starting to see a bit of a turn in numbers and visitors coming back in. That's really encouraging.
This month, there's been a small climb in visitor numbers as domestic borders open up and Australians gain the confidence to book holidays at home. But for tourism operators dependent on plane loads of international guests, the slow trickle is barely enough to get them by.
International was about 50% of our business at Ayers Rock Resort. We can really push and drive to survive with domestic, but recovery won't happen in fullness until the international borders open. That will happen when the government deems it appropriate.
Voyages is the company that runs both the resort and airport at Yulara. 2 large hotels remain closed to guests as the company tries to fill a skills gap left behind when tourism workers, many who were on international working visas, left the Red Centre.
Like any tourism business, we are taking a scaled approach to recovery, and a measured approach, an appropriate approach. And the faster we can get more people to come and work with us to be part of that journey, then the faster it'll happen.
It's not just larger operations suffering. Aboriginal communities are being hit hard. The resident-owned Mutijulu Community Aboriginal Corporation, or MCAC, runs an art centre, souvenir shop and cafe. Plummeting sales are having an impact.
MCAC is very much connected to tourism money because we run the 3 businesses that we have, the Walkajara Art Centre, the Ininti Cafe and the Ininti Store, and they're the businesses that make sure we have money to support the community in different projects and support them for cultural and social events, so we very much depend on that money.
Previously, when less was known about COVID-19, Mutijulu residents blockaded the road to protect their community from tourists. Now senior Anangu leaders like Valerie Brumby are taking a different approach. On one strict condition. And in small numbers they are.
It's not all doom and gloom here at Uluru. Domestic tourism numbers are starting to pick up, helping smaller businesses like this tick over.
Tourism worker James Morris works for this Segway tour business and lived through the COVID lockdown period. He's glad to see things are picking up.
There's a lot more people out here, a lot more people to talk to. Tours are picking up, guests are picking up, and things are starting to open again, which is really good.
But with the end of JobKeeper, the future for tourism workers across the country looks even more uncertain. The federal government hopes cheap flights will rescue the struggling sector. This week, around 800,000 half-price tickets to holiday destinations like Uluru will go on sale.
That one element of stimulus is not the complete answer.
Should JobKeeper be extended just for tourism operations?
Look, I think there's absolutely merit in a targeted wage stimulus, wage subsidy, however you want to describe it, for the tourism industry. Until we get some really strong news from the federal government about when borders may open, it just won't start to kick back. So there is a lag period.
In a mostly empty car park, these families who moved Uluru from the bucket list to the to-do list are happy with their choice.
This was something we were saving for later, but it's come a little bit earlier.
And yet in doing that, it's been terrific. It's been
fabulous.
Spectacular, and I'd really recommend anyone to do it.
It's great to be seeing an icon like this.
The Red Centre, on the long road to recovery. Oliver Gordon, ABC News.
The Nine network has been hit by a cyber attack, disrupting live broadcasts out of Sydney. Its morning program was the first to be affected, with host Richard Wilkins tweeting that technical issues were to blame. Late today, the media company confirmed there had been an attack on its systems. All employees across the country have been told to work from home until further notice. The Australian Cyber Security Centre says it's offering technical assistance. Australian sprinter Rowan Browning has earned a ticket to Tokyo after a record-breaking run at the Queensland Track Classic. The 23-year-old clocked 10.05 seconds in the 100-metre sprint, securing him a run at the upcoming Olympic Games. And he's the first Australian male in 17 years to do it.
Browning's pulling away from the field. It's going to be a big dip on the line. It's a legal performance. 10.05. He did it. Olympic qualifier.
It's one thing to get there, and it's another thing to get there and perform and do something that you can be proud of. It felt good, it felt vindicating, but I'm not going to spend too long celebrating.
It's also the third fastest 100-metre time ever recorded in Australia. Mr Browning has cracked the 10-second barrier before with a time of 9.96 in January, but it couldn't be used for an Olympic qualification because there was too much wind assistance. The Western Bulldogs have pulled off a thrilling victory against the West Coast Eagles in Melbourne this afternoon. Richmond was a class above the Hawks at the MCG, while after trailing at three-quarter time, the Dogs held on by just 7 points to remain unbeaten so far this season.
A late and heavy blow to a Bulldog led to an early and heavier hit on the scoreboard for the Eagles.
Dogs get the first on a Sunday afternoon.
But with West Coast size and skill in the forward pocket, they caught up before surging ahead with a bit of magic.
Liam Ryan's got it. He'll take Gardner on. Look at the tricks coming up. Left way, one way, back the other. Liam Ryan's got it!
But it was the home side that led at quarter time. They extended that advantage when the captain cast his own spell.
Bontempelli on his non-preferred. Snapping, bending, got it. Gee, that was good.
Now, when you're up against a goal-kicking wizard, though, it's always going to be tight.
Kennedy, no problems at all. Goal, 650.
The lead changed so many times in a heart-stopping final term.
To give the Dogs the lead back, he has.
But it was the Doggies who held their nerve.
Bontempelli to seal the game. He's got it. The Dogs are going to win.
At the MCG, all the pre-bounce chat was about how you stop Dustin Martin. Now, that's still unknown, but he's not the only weapon in the Premier's arsenal.
Jack played Rover and played it well.
The young Hawks looked overawed early, and Richmond gave them something to watch.
And Tom will do the rest. A blazing start by the Tigers.
Hawthorn fans did get a glimpse of the future.
And he's kicked his first goal in AFL footy. Well done, young man.
But the present still belongs to the Tigers.
The Hawks just can't bridge the gap because this Richmond team is mighty.
And it's at its mightiest when its biggest guns fire in unison.
A clear path to goal, and he wants to share the love some more. And Jack is more than happy to stand next to his mate Dusty today.
Today, tomorrow, and wherever the season takes them. Georgie Tunney, ABC News.
In the AFLW, Carlton's Darcy Vesio has taken out the league's top goal-kicking crown for a second time in a narrow win over GWS this afternoon. Earlier, an emphatic Adelaide secured the minor premiership with a 14-point win over Collingwood, leapfrogging the Pies on the ladder and earning a week off ahead of the finals.
The two-time champions have soared back to the top, primed for a tilt at a third premiership.
They get the week off, a home prelim and a home grand final should they make it.
I'm so pumped for our girls. We really wanted to come out and bring the pressure today, and to all the fans that joined us, they were just awesome. It was great to have a game on the home turf.
A perfect crumb had the Crows on the board early.
Mules front and centre, opening goal Adelaide.
But the Pies hit back fast. Jamie Lambert responding with a crumb of her own. Ashley Woodland then weaved some magic.
With the outside of the boot, it's going to go right to the line. That's a fantastic goal.
Adelaide's intensity on show in the second term.
Play will have to stop here. A really nasty one. In fact, it's Sophie Casey.
Sophie Casey ruled out of the game before the main break. The scoreboard pressure kept building for the Crows. And despite a lift from the Pies late, it was Adelaide who came out on top.
And the Crows have come from the clouds and stolen the minor premiership.
The Crows and Brisbane earning week one of the finals off, with Collingwood to host North Melbourne. The Demons will face Freo without superstar Daisy Pearce, who's damaged her medial collateral ligament. And while they won't make the finals, the Blues had plenty to play for in Blacktown. Darcy Vesio, the league's top goal kicker for a second time.
Goal number 16. She's setting a new benchmark in 2021.
Guiding Carlton to a thrilling 1-point win over the Giants to close out their season. Cameron Slesser, ABC News.
Knights veteran Mitchell Pearce has been denied victory in his 300th game, his side going down to West Tigers 20 points to 24 in Newcastle. The Knights and Tigers scored 4 tries apiece, but it was sloppy performances by Pearce's teammates that ended Newcastle's unbeaten winning streak.
The stage was set for the Knights to celebrate their halfback's milestone game.
The guard of honour for Mitchell Pearce. Well done, Mitchell, on reaching 300 games in the NRL.
But the West Tigers had come to spoil the party, scoring the first try.
Goes over for the Tigers.
Both sides scored 2 tries in the first half.
Burnett this time.
But the Knights missed both conversions, giving Wests a 4-point lead at the break. The Tigers came out firing in the second half.
Unstoppable force.
Trailing by 10, Pearce stole the show.
Pearce in game 300. That is quite the moment. Mitchell Pearce scores for the Knights.
But it was Newcastle's 18 errors to the Tigers' 6 that proved the difference.
It's frustrating. It was an important occasion for us.
When we got ourselves back into the game with some really good footy, the errors cost us the game again.
The final score 20-24, giving Wests their first win of the season. Cronulla has backed calls to introduce an 18th substitute after losing 3 players to concussion and a 4th to a knee injury. The Sharks bench was depleted, most carnage he's witnessed in his 20 years in the game.
I never ever seen a team go down to 13 players at half time. I certainly could have done with a fresh player tonight, that's for sure.
Chloe Hart, ABC News.
The A-League's new boys, Macarthur, have moved up to 3rd place on the A-League ladder with a 1-0 win over the Wellington Phoenix in Wollongong. After a cagey first half where defence won out, Macarthur would find the winner in the second half.
Ivan Franjic might fancy a shot himself, swings it into the box, deflected. It must be a goal here. The ricochet took it into the path of Jean Rowe, who could not miss, and the deadlock is broken.
Meanwhile, last night, bottom-placed Melbourne Victory held the top of the table Central Coast Mariners to a surprise 1-1 draw in Gosford, while a 10-man Perth Glory held on late to defeat the lowly Newcastle Jets 2-1 in the West. Australian Daniel Ricciardo has qualified 6th fastest for the season-opening Formula One Grand Prix in Bahrain, with Dutchman Max Verstappen taking out the pole. Having made the move to McLaren for the new season, Ricciardo said he got the thumbs up from team bosses after securing 6th spot on the grid, but it was Verstappen who stole the headlines in the final qualifying.
It's all eyes on this man, Carlos Sainz, and the man behind him, Max Verstappen as well. Verstappen quickest through the middle sector. Sainz 4th fastest. Hamilton's on provisional pole. Verstappen beats him by 2/100ths of a second. That's the battle we want to see in Formula One in 2021.
It's a 4th pole position of the Red Bull driver's career. The defending champion in Bahrain, Lewis Hamilton, will start from 2nd. Now to the weather. Tonight's viewer pick is Garamela Boulevard by Alison McShanig. There was a bit of cloud about the south today, very isolated storms in the Lassiter district. It was 33 in Darwin today, 34 in Jabiru. 35 today in Katherine, 30 in Nhulunbuy and 34 in Borroloola. Alice Springs reached 31, 37 in Tennant Creek. Nhulunbuy got 25 millimetres of rain in the 24 hours to 9 a.m. Solid falls at Warrawee today, 34 millimetres fell there. Around Australia, 27 in Sydney today, 20 in Melbourne, warm in Perth, 33. On the satellite, thunderstorms in the top end today, clear in the south. A trough is developing in the north through the Arafura Sea. Interstate tomorrow, a bit of rain on the east coast, sunny in Canberra, 23. To our north, a typical rainy season day, storms and 33 in Bali. Around the Territory tomorrow, a sunny day in Central Australia, 29 in Alice Springs. Further north, storms about, 31 in Numbulwar, 35 in Katherine. And in the west, 34 in Bachelor, and it's heading for a top of 33 in Darwin tomorrow. Low tide will be at 1 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, high tide coming in at 7.8 metres. The sun will rise tomorrow at 10 to 7, and you can see the sunset at 6:52. Looking ahead for Darwin, late thunderstorms continuing for the next couple of days, becoming hot and dry on Tuesday. In Alice Springs, sunny with temperatures a little below average for this time of year. And that's ABC News for this Sunday night. Thanks for your company. Good night.